experience of eye-opening, mind-expanding, revealing common sense discussion for the common sense citizen. Strap yourself in, put your trays in the upright position, remove dentures and loose jewelry, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and come along for the ride. It is time for the Joe Mangiacotti Show on Powerhouse Station WCRN 830, and our affiliates and streaming on the TuneIn app. It's Joe time, baby.
All right, folks, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show from the Box Drop in Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Don't forget that we do have a text line up and running, and that is 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. You can take us anywhere. We're live streaming on the TuneIn app. That's right, from any phone or device. Just browse WCRN, and there we are, streaming right along. We're also broadcasting on our Facebook page. That's Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. There is a camera in the studio, but the important thing is the audio is streaming right along on that site. So you can listen to us in several ways this morning, including telling Alexa to play WCRN. She'll do that with no questions asked. You can reach out to the show off air at JoeMShow@gmail.com. And we do have an office number, which is 508-603-9778. All right. Again, from the Box Drop Middlesex Outlet Studios, I'm Joe Mangiacotti. Good morning, Cam.
Morning.
How are you, sir?
Not too bad.
Enjoying the break in the weather here? It's pretty nice. Pretty nice. Did you lose your headset?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I had to plug the headset in.
Oh, God. You put on an headset, but that wasn't plugged in.
Yes.
That's funny. Not as bad as using a microphone that's not plugged in, which I've done in the past. All right. Any big plans for today?
Nope. Lay down.
What was that?
Lay down.
Lay down. All right. All right, folks. We've got a lot to talk about this morning. Now, coming up in hour two, we will be joined finally from Michael Beatrice. We were going to have him on last weekend. Some scheduling conflicts prevented that, but he's the author of the book COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial, the coronavirus vaccine rollout here in the U.S. It's picked up some steam in a number of cases. Hospitalizations and deaths are trending sharply downward, thank goodness, and causing cautious optimism here in the States and finally getting the upper hand in the fight against the COVID-19 virus. But see, it's the debate over the loosening of the lockdowns and the restrictions, and this is the big problem, especially when it comes to the schools and how ridiculous the lockdowns have affected that. Of course, to the most healthy of us, that the virus has basically no effect on school-age children. But we'll be speaking with Michael in hour two at 7 o'clock. All right, 508-871-7000 from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. You can join the conversation. You know, I got to tell you something. I have been telling you that China has to be watched. Their aggression is something that we need to pay attention to. You know, President Trump was on, I think, Judge Janine the other night. Last night, it might have been 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. I don't know what time it was. But he was speaking with her, and he made a good point that the Chinese never would have spoken to him or his agents like they did in Alaska the other day. And they are absolutely seeing the Biden administration as an opportunity to ignore the United States as a player in this. And what's concerning is this Iran and China. They inked a 25-year trade deal, cooperation trade deal. And one of the brilliant things that the Trump administration had done is got Iran back on their heels. They struck deals and they applied an incredible amount of financial pressure through embargoes and restrictions and trades to Iran, not giving them a lot of options, certainly nothing to finance their nuclear armament, much less terrorist activities. And they were seeking help. Now, the Biden administration, of course, is reversing Trump policies. 3 historic peace deals were done under the Trump administration in the Middle East, which the media ignores for the most part. But it was done because Trump isolated Iran and was cutting them off financially, making them have to come to the table and look for a deal. But now, Iran and China have inked this long-term accord, and this is going to give Iran not just breathing room, but the funds that they're seeking. This comprehensive strategic partnership for a 25-year arrangement, it's wide-ranging. It's going to cover oil and mining, transportation, agriculture, industrial development. And they just did it yesterday. It's finalized. And it's not a good thing for the world. Not a good thing for America. Relations between the two countries have now reached the level of strategic partnership, and China seeks to comprehensively improve relations with Iran. Reuters reports our relations with Iran will not be affected by the current situation, but will be permanent and strategic. It's China. We need to return to the sanctions that were there. There were crippling sanctions during the Trump administration. And that forced Iran to seek out other partnerships. And Biden in office gave China the window it needed, the opportunity. Under Biden, it's keenly interested in re-engaging in Iran. And it wouldn't have been like that under the Trump administration. So again, we have to watch China. They're building islands off the coast. They've moved into Hong Kong. They are eyeing Taiwan right now. And that's going to be a serious problem for us, folks, because we have peace treaties in place with Taiwan. America does, to defend her. We've been providing them with defensive technology. That's going to be a real problem. They've encroached the borders of India. They've taken claim to what was considered international waters and considered international or islands within international waters. For crying out loud, they've just recently decided that they're going to take claim to the dark side of the moon. Yeah, you heard that right. China is going to take ownership of the moon. They'll leave our little flag up there alone. But the moon's a substantial piece of real estate, folks. And they have every intention to have an operational moon base before the United States does. And I know some people are saying, that's a little crazy. What are you talking about? Who cares? Having a strategic operational base on the moon, I mean, when you talk about the strategies of battle, what has every general in the history of battle ever wanted was the high ground, was it not? Always take the high ground. See your enemy coming. It's easier to attack. It's easier to defend. Well, I would say that having a base on the moon is about as high ground as you can get. So you have to keep an eye on China, folks. It's not a joke, and it's not hyperbole. They've wanted to be the world power, not just number one, but the only world power for a long time. They have been working on a very long-term plan for this, and the only thing that was a hiccup in that was the Trump administration. And quite honestly, the things that the Trump administration did as far as tariffs and deals they made was what China expected us to do and had no respect for us when we didn't. And quite frankly, was laughing at us prior to that. So this left the talking point that all this stuff has to be fixed, including from the border to the China relationships. It's just such a crock. It's propaganda. But you have to keep an eye on this. We will keep an eye on this. But this deal that was inked between Iran and China this weekend, not good for the United States and not good for the planet Earth. All right, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation from the Boxtrop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. Don't forget we have a text line at 617-297-8388. So another thing that we have to watch, folks, is the Second Amendment in the guns, because they are coming for your guns. And I know that's cliche, and I know you hear this, and everybody seems to think, don't worry about it. It's the Second Amendment. It's the amendment. It's in the Constitution. We have nothing to worry about. But do you? Do you? First of all, as usual, it's being demonstrated to us that the left and that there are different rules depending on who you are and who you're connected to. And, Hunter's back in the news, and not because of the dark money from China and Moscow, not because of all that was on the laptop that nobody wants to talk about. One of the most squashed stories inside the Beltway would be that laptop. But it actually has to do with a gun in Hunter Biden. And this is going back a couple of years ago, where he apparently tossed a gun into the dumpster outside a convenience store. And from all accounts that reporters can figure out is somehow the Secret Service, who came to, act as fixers in this situation, yet he wasn't under Secret Service protection in 2018. He was, of course, up until 2016 as the son of a sitting vice president, and would be now as the son of a sitting president. But Hunter Biden's texts are contradicting that the Secret Service wasn't involved in this gun situation. So we'll just read the story for you. Hunter Biden sent text messages that said that the Secret Service responded after a handgun disappeared in 2018. Now, this is in contradiction to the agency's assertion that it was not involved. But that doesn't match up with witnesses. See, in a lengthy message sent by Biden's son, Hunter, described the situation in detail, saying that his former sister-in-law, she turned over, and that's Haley Biden, by the way, she tossed the firearm into this trash bin outside Jansen's Market. It's a grocery store in Wilmington, Delaware. Actually, it's a gourmet grocery store in Wilmington, Delaware. And he writes that she stole the gun out of his trunk in a lockbox, threw it in the garbage. So she seemed to be fearful. And this is going to tie into a story in a SCOTUS currently hearing a gun case. I'm going to tie this all in a second for you. So she feels that he shouldn't have access to this gun. Hunter. But Hunter is going to hurt himself or somebody else. So she takes the gun out of a lockbox in his trunk. She throws it in the garbage outside this market or in the alley or what have you. And then wrote to him that, it's his problem. You deal with it. See, then when the police and the FBI and the Secret Service came on the scene, she told them, I took the gun because she was scared that he would harm himself due to his drug-induced situation here, an alcohol problem, and their volatile relationship, and that she was afraid for her kids. So remember all this. She takes the gun away. She throws it in a trash can. Not the smartest thing to do, by the way. That's not securing a gun. That's probably the worst thing you can do. You don't think that people find things that are thrown away? Kids? Homeless, going through the trash. It's just not a smart thing to do, folks. So she does this because she's scared that he would harm her or kids because of drugs and his alcohol problem in the volatile relationship. So she's afraid for her well-being and the kids' well-being. And he wrote in a text that it was no joke that the cops are trying to convince him that Haley was saying, hey, she was scared of him. And he refers to the gun as my 38. So we can, I guess, infer from this, because it doesn't list the gun, that it's a 38. And this was all supposed to happen in December of 28, that she took the lockbox out of the truck, put it in a paper bag, threw it in the trash can. He said he freaked out when he saw it was missing 10 minutes later, or 10 minutes after she took it. And that it was going to lead the state police to investigate him. Now, see, these messages were contained on the hard drive obtained by the New York Post, part of the contents of the damaged laptop computer. Remember, that was left in that Wilmington repair shop. So all this information is starting to trickle out from that infamous laptop. It was later seized by the FBI. And the Delaware Attorney's Office, U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware, I should say, they're actually looking into tax situations because of that. Now, apparently what happened, this 38 was the firearm that we're talking about. It was fished out of the trash several days later and then surrendered by an older man who found it while searching for recycled items. See, that's why it's not a smart idea. Trash bins are a haven for can collectors, obviously constantly looking in trash to find cans people throw out so that they can cash the money in. They also go through the trash bins to look for other valuables or anything. The point is, it's not a smart idea. So this is Hunter Biden, who hasn't had all his guns seized or his residence searched. But yet right now, we have SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, hearing arguments in a gun seizure case. And this actually comes from our neighbors to the south in Rhode Island, this case stems from. And it has to do with the police searching Fourth Amendment issue. Coneglia versus Strom out of Providence, Rhode Island. So the Cranston police, well, it's probably, I should say that it's Cranston actually, reported the Providence Journal. So the Cranston police, back in 2015, seized a man's guns. But what happened was his wife calls the police and says she's afraid and concerned that he might be suicidal or harm people. So the police respond, and they determine that the best thing here to do is to have this gentleman go in for psychiatric evaluation, which in essence is a form of seizure. So that's the first seizure that we're talking about, seizure of a person. So they send him off to psychiatric evaluation, which, by the way, he is examined, and the doctors rule that he's not suicidal, nor is he a danger to anyone else. But what the police do after they send him away, and in that case, it can be argued that they were exigent circumstances because they're being told by the man's wife that he's a danger. So they remove him from the scene, send him to the hospital. Now, all the danger is gone. There's no extenuating circumstance or exigent circumstances right now. But they decide to go into the house without procuring any permission from the wife whatsoever and search the home. They really don't have any legal basis for that. There's no warrant, no exigent circumstances, no emergency facing them. And they violate the sanctity of one's home. And the court has ruled over and over again, that's home is a man's castle. The threshold, to cross the threshold of a home, you need exigent circumstances or a warrant. So the question is whether the Cranston police overstepped this resident in local gun owners' rights when the officers entered his home and seized his weapons after they sent him to get psychiatric evaluation. And he's not on the scene. He's not there. So at issue is whether the police, shielded by their roles as community caretakers, responding to a potential crisis. So now he gets released with a, well, for lack of a better way of putting it, folks, right? Clean bill of health. The doctors multiple doctors determined he's not a danger to himself. He's not a danger to anyone else. So I'm thinking it might be a situation where a wife is using the law more as a sword than a shield. And that's the first lesson you learn in law school and law debate is the law is to be used as a shield, not a weapon, not a sword. So the case, which encompasses the sanctity of one's home, gun rights, and a police officer's duty to make those snap decisions in tough situations, they end up seizing the weapons of the 60-year-old man, Edward Coneglia. Now, U.S. Court Chief Judge John McConnell in 2019 ruled that the officers were acting in keeping with their duty to protect the public when they sent Coneglia to get evaluated. and that's fine, and seize his guns without a warrant. Now, that's where we go off the rails here. Because the First Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that decision, that seizing the guns were also fine. Remember, no warrant, no exigent circumstances, all threats and problems were removed, and then he's got a clean bill of health, by the way, so he's not a danger. There's no reason at this point to take those guns. And they did not receive permission. They did not get consent from the wife, which could have given it, but she didn't, nor was she asked. So Edward Coneglia appeals to the Supreme Court. And so now that's in front of the Supreme Court. And guess who chimes in now? Now that it's 2021 and it's reached the Supreme Court? The Biden administration. That's right. Joe Biden, or as we've come to learn by this point, it's whoever's controlling Joe Biden, the powers behind Oz here, the wizard, is asking the court to expand the ability of police officers to enter homes without warrants and to seize firearms. They're taking this case and this opportunity to make it precedent, to open the door for searching your home without warrants, consent, or those exigent circumstances which are so vital to searches without warrants, to make it okay and commonplace, and to include the seizing of your firearms with no lawful precedence, no lawful reason whatsoever. And what's interesting in this, because it is in front of the Supreme Court, and you know who's the one that's asking the smart questions here in this case, in this debate? Justice Sotomayor, right? She's the one who seems to have a lot of common sense here. She's the one asking the right questions. Because if your argument is taking the guns because they can be used, I mean, did the police also take all of the knives and bats and clubs and garden tools that can be used as a weapon? No, they didn't. No, they didn't. We'll continue with this because this is a very dangerous precedent that could be set here. But we need to take a break here on the Joe Mangiacotti Show and come back in the second half of the first hour in just a moment. From the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios, I'm Joe Mangiacotti. Stick with us. Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti here, and you might have picked up on the fact that I've recently moved and was taking the time to purge the clutter and freshen up some of the furniture and decor. And there is no better item to freshen up than your bed. That's right, your bed is the most important piece of furniture you have. After all, you spend more than a third of your life on it. I checked out the huge, once family-owned stores with tens of thousands of square feet of showroom and warehouses and movie theaters and food courts and shows and the overhead that goes with them. But then I discovered a true family-owned shop. John Rosenfeld and his son have a small showroom and warehouse right in Metro West, 50 Main Street, Ashland. John and his family are actually there in person. They do keep hours, but will meet you by appointment. That's right. John will meet you when it's convenient for you. I first bought a mattress from the big store the brothers used to own and a power base that moved the head and feet, but then I met John and checked out his showroom at 50 Main Street in Ashland and online at boxdropmiddlesex.com and ended up with a better mattress and power base that also heats and massages, all for less than half of what I was going to spend at the other place. Box Drop is a a discount mattress store. And John specializes in clearance and closeouts and buys directly from the manufacturer with low overhead and just family employees, passing the savings on to you, and you can see it reflected in the price every day. Click boxdropmiddlesex.com or call John on his cell. This is his cell number, 508-579-9309. That's 508-579-9309. And find John on Facebook at BoxDropMiddlesex. John loves referrals, and this is the best referral I've given so far this year. DropBoxMiddlesex.com.
This is Sean Burke, President of the Licensed Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts, asking you to visit us at lpdam.org when you think you need a private investigator. Don't let your emotions negatively affect your future. Get your answers through a Massachusetts licensed private investigator. Get the facts without risking your credibility by unknowingly committing a criminal offense. You need a license to perform investigations in Massachusetts. What are some types of work that requires a license? Any type of surveillance, interviewing someone for a third party, background and asset checks are just a few examples. For more on this, visit us at lpdm.org and tune into AM 830 WCRN Sunday mornings at 7:30 for case files from the LPDM or anytime at lpdmcasefiles.com.
We know why you're awake. Your child is about to get their driver's license. Levante's Auto School offers one-week driving programs to help make sure your child stays safe and focused behind the wheel.
877 Drive Ed. Who's Ed?
That's the number for Levante's Auto School.
Learn to drive safely and efficiently. Visit one of our 5 locations throughout Massachusetts. Click Levante'sAutoschool.com.
Levante's Auto School shows you how to learn the rules and keep your cool. 877 Drive Ed.
Who's Ed? That's the number for Levante's Auto School.
This is Find a Forever Home for Teddy's Friends, brought to you by the Cantiani Insurance Group with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance. This week's candidate comes to us from Buddy Dog in Sudbury. You should get to know Scooby. He is a handsome young goofball from South Carolina. He loves everyone he meets, humans and pups alike. He does like to play hard, so roommates of any species will need to be sturdy and confident enough to handle him. So a large fenced-in yard would be a pretty good thing for Scooby. He would not do well in a small home or apartment. He's a 2-year-old neutered male, unknown breed mix, about 70 pounds but a healthy weight. He was found as a stray in South Carolina. He is food motivated and he does know sit, so training will be pretty easy and some basic obedience training is recommended. Again, Scooby comes to us from Buddy Dog in Sudbury. For more on Scooby, check out Teddy Goodpup's Facebook page for links and pictures and of course information how to visit and maybe even adopt Scooby and bring him home to his new forever home. Find a Forever Home is brought to you by Cantiani Insurance Group with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance and anytime at 508-791-2088.
It's time to go out with Joe.
Welcome to this edition of Out with Joe from the Cantiani Insurance Studios, brought to you by Nothing Bun Cakes in White City Plaza in Shrewsbury. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. And this week, we're going to be taking a look at the fact that outdoor dining and fans in the stands is back in style as Phase 4 of the Massachusetts reopening plan begins. Newbury Street was alive recently with activity as a crew built a deck over part of the pavement just outside of the Linetta restaurant. See, outdoor dining is allowed again in Boston. Alan Rodriguez of the restaurant said, the sun is out, and I think it's a good vibe for everyone. We all need it. We were all in quarantine for a long time. No kidding, Alan. Well, it comes as Massachusetts has moved into the next step in its reopening plan. Fans are allowed back in the stands for professional sports at 12% capacity. With Bruin players in quarantine, fans are hoping to get into the Garden later this week. Also back in the game, wedding venues like the Fairmont at Copley Plaza can now host as many as 100 guests for its inside event. Dance floors are also allowed at the events now. So as people go to stay at hotels in these venues, you know what they're doing? They're going out. They're having dinner in neighborhood. They're using taxis. And they're even checking out tourist attractions like the aquarium and other historic sites for that matter. Despite the excitement, some have been concerned that the state's reopening is moving too fast and could lead to another surge. A group of organizations, including the Massachusetts Teachers Association, color me surprised. Of course, they sent a letter to the governor urging him to reconsider, who would want to put an end to a very long paid vacation? Positive COVID cases are on the rise in Massachusetts, but with the vaccination numbers increasing, the governor had said the timing does make sense. For more on dining news and information, check out withjoe.com. We suspend the Music Minute for obvious reasons, but follow us on social media at Out With Joe. Out With Joe has been brought to you by Nothing Bundt Cakes in White City Plaza, Shrewsbury, on Facebook at Nothing Bundt Cakes Shrewsbury. Have you heard of the hottest new bakery around? I know you heard about it right here. My friend Al has opened Nothing Bundt Cake in the White City Plaza in Shrewsbury. Nothing Bundt Cake is a bakery chain and is locally owned and operated by my friend Al. They have bundt cakes ranging from bite-sized to tiered, plus platters, candles, and cards. For any occasion, function, or just to have around the house or office, stop by and check them out. Everything is baked from scratch and on site. Nothing beats a sweet surprise. And until you try one of Al's bundt cakes, you haven't tried a real bundt cake. Stop by and ask for Al. Tell him Joe told you to stop by. 98 Boston Turnpike, White City Plaza near Planet Fitness, Shrewsbury, and on Facebook as well, Nothing Bundt Cake Shrewsbury.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of the first hour of the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Don't forget, coming up at 7 o'clock, Michael Beatrice, the author of Coronavirus, COVID-19 lockdowns on trial. He's a coronavirus researcher. Will join us at 7 o'clock. All right, we are broadcasting from the Box Drop, Middlesex, Mattress Outlet Studios, 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is 617-297-8388. And I'm talking about the Supreme Court case right now, considering Fourth Amendment exceptions to let the police seize guns without a warrant. This is serious. The Biden administration, they've weighed in on this. They're asking the court to set a precedence here. And this court case could dramatically expand the ability of police to enter your home without a warrant, including seizing firearms. This has a wide-ranging and freewheeling ramifications to it. The debate is around the exception to the Fourth Amendment. And this originally had to deal with the car, the automobile. A court case that ruled that when police took you into custody at your car, that searching the car was not, at that point, exigent circumstances. It was not a violation of the Fourth Amendment, illegal search and seizure. And there are other situations, right? The well-being checks, going to a home, finding the door open on a well-being check, that gives them the ability to enter the house. Those are circumstances. Crying babies, dangerous falls by elderly people, right? These are all situations the court has looked at. But in this Canaglia versus Strom, it all started with that argument with the married couple in Cranston, Rhode Island. And this Edward Canaglia, he did grab the unloaded gun and asked his wife, "Why don't you just shoot me and get me out of my misery?" Which, God, how many times has a spouse probably said that in a fight to the other spouse? But the wife went and she spent the night at a hotel or motel. She left, but concerned about her husband, she called the Cranston police and asked them to do a well-being check. And when they showed up, he denied he was suicidal, but, they still convinced him and said they insisted that he go for a psychiatric evaluation at the local hospital, which he did, and he was pretty much immediately discharged. But while he was there, they entered his home and they seized his guns, again, without exigent circumstances and without permission from the wife. They seized 2 handguns, no warrant, and this forced Ed, the husband, to bring a civil rights lawsuit to justify giving those guns back. Now, the police invoked the community caretaking exception to the Fourth Amendment and the requirement for a warrant, which the Supreme Court first crafted to deal with, again, like I said, the impounded cars and highway safety. So it was vehicle specific in its origins for that exemption, not a home, which the court has continually over and over again held as your home is your castle, and you need a lot more in your argument to illegally enter that home, much less seize anything. And it's Justice Sonia Sotomayor who's the one asking the questions that should be asked, because the court seems to be getting off on this tangent and not really looking at what is a question here. And it's Justice Sotomayor who's saying, I think that everyone has forgotten here, at least in this situation, that there was no immediate danger to the person threatening suicide and no immediate danger to the wife because the suicide person was removed to the hospital. So once that happened and he was removed and she's at a hotel, there's no immediate danger. There's no threat of danger. There's no, at least as of right now, the legal reason for them to do that, despite the fact that the Cranston police are trying to cover their butt with the exemption rule. But if this comes down the wrong way and sets a precedence, the police can enter your home if they just feel like there's guns in there, which of course they know whether there are guns in there because we're required to register our guns. See where we're going with this? All right, Joe Mangiacotti from the Boxtrap Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios, 508-871-7000. Let's go to the phones. Ken, thank you for holding patiently. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Joe.
What's happening?
I guess this is legal matters discussion.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring back the Sidney Powell topic because I see significant problems that will result from what she, or at least her lawyers, stated earlier this week. And that is to the extent that there's a whole slew of people that are also sued by Dominion. And her action, I would think, makes them extremely vulnerable.
Make Dominion vulnerable or her vulnerable?
No, makes Fox News and a whole list of celebrities, because effectively she's admitted to being a liar and fooling the people who are listening to her.
Yeah.
And defaming the people who are listening to her.
Well, it will be interesting to see whether or not, because Fox, they're still a news outlet, and if they report what is going on and what she's saying, I mean, look at what other outlets have done, right? They pushed the Russian hoax for years, and there's no fallback there. So,
well, I guess the comparison I'm using is the Covington kids.
He had a hell of a suit and a hell of a settlement. That kid.
Well, what's the difference between him and Dominion?
I'm not arguing there is. I'm not saying there is. But there is a little bit of a difference. I mean, at what point is, I guess the court would have to determine, it would have to be argued, right? At what point did she cross over to opinion? And what point did she leave factual information? And how much is opinion, how much is facts, and then how was it reported? If you cover the story and you report that Sidney Powell is saying this, there's no liability on the reporting agency here. They're reporting what a prominent public figure is saying. Doesn't mean they endorse what they're saying. It depends how that's presented. In the Covington kid situation, they erroneously reported and then knew the difference and doubled down on it. And they knowingly reported false information. And they weren't reporting that this Covington kid said anything. They just made up and decided their own narrative there. And again, they doubled down on it and ruined this. And prior to this, that kid wasn't a public figure, nor was he presenting a case. He literally stood there saying nothing. And they went around it. So if a news outlet is reporting, and Sidney Powell she's a public figure. She's in the public domain. Prior to this, she was a well-known figure. So reporting on what she's doing and saying is just news. You see what I'm saying? So there's a distinction between there, which would be argued. And of course, we know, Ken, right, that the civil suits require a lower threshold than criminal cases do.
So effectively, while you've made the case, Fox and others are definitely vulnerable. And what does that do to us learning about the corruption surrounding our elections? So this literally, our opportunity to defend the integrity of elections is being shattered.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're not, because at this point, and this is something that's happening in a lot of fronts, I mean, including in the United States military, right? We have a very woke new leadership happening at the Pentagon, where they're going to root out extremists and racists. And our ability to learn what is going on, because it's coming to a point, Ken, that if you question anything and it's against the ruling class right now, that's hate speech. And look at the number of people who have been fired or gone after for asking questions. It's happening all over the place. Even people involved with the January 6th Capitol demonstration. I mean, there's a story here about a ATF agent who didn't do anything. He was just there. Matter of fact, he was there, and he posted video while he was there saying, "I can't believe how quickly they're turning on the police," and helped the police. And by the time he got home, he was notified he was terminated. I mean, there's really this motion going on of speech. Speech police, speech control.
Absolutely.
And it's happening.
But literally, you have to have a referee to say, blow the whistle and say, that's going too far.
Well, that's supposed to be the court.
Well, yeah, and the courts have been corrupted, but more than anything, it's what we learn through our various media, who are so blatantly biased that they will give carte blanche to that which is outrageous.
And this is a serious problem that we have, folks, because what's considered the mainstream media has just demonstrated and proven themselves over and over and over again that they are biased and that it's not beyond them to lie and to lie by omission, because not covering news because it would hurt your political favorites is lying by omission. So we can't trust them, which is why it's important that you get your news from multiple sources. And you have the technology at your fingertips with the internet. And yes, the internet's loaded with a bunch of crackpots and a bunch of bull and mistruth. I get that. But you have to do a little work and add a little common sense. But we can see that plenty of people are doing the evaluation, Ken, right, as to what the networks cover. And anything anti-Biden or has to do with Hunter gets 0 or seconds compared to some other news outlets would cover it as a news issue. And even watching Thursday's presser with Joe Biden, we watched with our own eyes him do what can only be described as a disaster of a press conference. He literally got lost in mid-sentences, totally lost his train of thought, forgot what he was talking about, didn't know where to go. We watched that. But then what did the CNNs and NBCs tell us? It was a fantastic press conference.
Right. Most mainstream media just didn't cover that. And most people are working at 1 in the afternoon.
Yeah. So they're only going to hear the highlights in the selected clips. Right? And that's another reason it was held at 1:30 and not 7, 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night. And it was scripted. It was scripted down to the cue card there, the cheat card with the journalist or the reporter's picture in what number next to call them on and what order and who they worked for, to those other cue cards. I mean, we didn't see Trump do that, even Bill Clinton or Barack Obama to that extent. No modern president has had that kind of notes. I mean, you expect this, and this is the other part of it. The media is not doing their job because they're not asking about his mental capacity, his faculties. Remember, they were 4 years relentless on Donald Trump, continually speaking of invoking the 25th, and also to the point that he did the test for mental acuity, passed it with flying colors. And where's the media insisting that happened here and that those results? We're not even getting the typical medical doctor's evaluation of his physical that we normally get for presidents. Cholesterol, weight, blood pressure, that kind of thing. That's normally part of a briefing from their medical doctor. We saw it with Trump. We saw it with Obama. We saw it with Clinton. It happens. We haven't seen that. Joe Biden has been sealed up, handled and controlled, and every move is orchestrated. And even at the level of control in editing that they've demonstrated, he has still managed to go off script and have gaffes and demonstrate his declining faculties and his cognitive abilities. But nobody's asking that. Fox is, maybe. Tucker Carlson is, sure. Hannity is, sure. CNN, NBC, ABC, no, they're not. They're not asking the questions. This is the President of the United States. Whether you voted for him or not, whatever your position is on it, he's been sworn in. He has all the power of the office, even to the point that, Ken, his own members of his own party wanted to take the ability to launch the nuclear codes or use the nuclear codes to a committee form. His own party doesn't want that power resting in him. And Nancy Pelosi's talk in pushing of Congress or the House having the ability to invoke the 25th before Trump left, that was thinking down the road. That wasn't for Trump. Trump was days away from going out of office. That was because Joe Biden was going to be in office. And he announced it. What was the news that broke on Thursday that didn't get a lot of coverage, but I thought was pretty significant announcement? And that's him saying he was running for a second term. After he told us during the entire campaign, Ken, what did he tell us? That he was going to be a one-term president.
How is it that the media knew to ask him that question?
Well, I would assume the same reason the media asked and knew to ask any questions that they did with Hillary and Obama We know. We know that they talk
question.
to each other, Ken, right? I mean, Donna Brazile got busted giving the questions to Hillary. Do you really think that was a one-off? That was the only time that ever happened? There is an absolute conspiracy between the media and this White House. They're dutifully doing their jobs to be his propaganda machine. I mean, listen to the questions and how they ask him. You're so wonderful and such a nice guy. That's why these immigrants are coming. What the hell are you talking about? There wasn't one COVID-19 question asked at Thursday's presser. And why not? Because they didn't even want to open that door. Because Biden's been trying to take credit for the Trump administration's incredible achievement of getting those vaccines in record time. And despite what Joe Biden says, there were millions of doses produced in arms before he took office. If you listen to him, and only listen to him, and looked at the history of it, you would think that Trump screwed the pooch on this whole thing, and nothing was in place and ordered and working until Joe Biden came into office, which is so not the case. All he had to do was just let what was already set up and running run its course. In ordering more doses to vaccines that were created by the previous administration in record time and with procedures and policies that no one did before, just ordering more of those. Okay, if you want to count that as an incredible achievement to your administration, knock yourself out. Take credit for that. But all you're doing is ordering more of the vaccines that were created under the previous administration. The same vaccines that him and Kamala Harris said they wouldn't take if they were under a Trump administration. They're the same exact vaccines they had put into their arms. And she had to go out there and try to backtrack, telling people, no, take them. How much damage did she do telling people that she wouldn't take a vaccine if Trump was president? And the media, nobody calls them on this, Ken. Nobody asks these questions. And even that Peter Doocy from Fox asked Jen Psaki, said, hey, how come Fox isn't ever on that list? And she tried to pivot. Well, don't I ask you questions? Didn't you ever ask about, well, yeah, after he's not on the list, he has to shout the questions as he's walking off stage. But why isn't Fox ever part of this? Could you imagine if Trump went out there and only took questions from Fox and News One and Newsmax and didn't take any, never called on CNN, NBC, or anybody else? What that criticism would be? But we're approaching 7 o'clock, Ken. I'm going to have to let you go. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. We're going to come back on the other side with Michael Beatrice and talk a little bit about the COVID-19 lockdowns and, of course, the erosion of our rights that have happened with this. All this on the Joe Mangiacotti Show from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. Stick with us.
WACE Chicopee and WCRN Worcester.
7 o'clock.
Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti from the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. Reminding you, talk radio is the immune system to the partisan, bias, political rhetoric attacking us on a daily basis. Get inoculated. The Joe Mangiacotti Show is your vaccine. Join me weekend mornings, 6 to 8.
I want to tell you what Cantiani Insurance has been able to do for me and Teddy. We stopped in to see Paul Sr. and the great staff at 318 Plantation Street. They've been handling my car and business insurance for years. Teddy was making his way around the the office, and they let me know. They now offer pet insurance. For a fraction of what one visit to the vet was for Teddy, they could cover him for a whole year. I know you treat your furry family members like any other family member, and as well as I do Teddy. The professional staff at Cantiani's has been providing courteous service for over 40 years, with integrity and personalized service, making sure that your insurance actually protects you and your family. With 2 locations, the 318 Plantation Street in Worcester and East Douglas Insurance Agency, located at 306 Main Street in Douglas. For home, auto, business insurance, and now pet insurance, click CantianiAgency.com or call 508-791-2088. 508-791-2088.
If you were to ask any retiree in a word, they would tell you that retirement is all about income. Income in retirement is a permission slip to enjoy life. Income provides the freedom to spend money each month knowing that more will arrive next month and the month after that. As important as it is to accumulate assets for your retirement, it's equally, if not more important, to maximize the income being generated from your assets. My name is Jerry Doherty, and my radio program, Making Money Last, has been heard right here on WCRN. Well, do you know if your retirement income is as high as it could be? Are you living off less than you should be? Well, I'd like to offer you a complimentary review to answer that very question. Simply call my office at 877-772-1776. I'm conveniently located right on Route 9 in Westboro. Again, my number is 877-772-1776. Let's increase your income today.
So are you tired of being tired? Well, then it's time to get the tea. Hey, it's Lisa here to tell you about this all-natural, all-organic tea I've been drinking that has had great results for over 20 years. It's called Life Change Tea, and it's specially formulated to help detoxify and cleanse your kidneys, liver, colon, and blood all at once. The colon is one of the most ignored organs in the human body. The faster that waste is eliminated from the body, the less time that waste sits in our intestines, spreading toxins to our bloodstream. This tea helps cleanse chemicals caused by outside intruders from our entire digestive system. And get this, weight loss can be a side effect. And with continued use of the tea, you can experience clearer, healthier, younger looking skin, increased energy, and a happier outlook on life. So if you're tired of being tired, get the Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. And like me, you'll be glad you did.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of the Joe Mangiacotti Show from the Box Drop at Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. And don't forget, you can also email us at textjoeintheradio@gmail.com. It appears on the same screen in real time. All right, as promised, folks, let me invite into the conversation Michael Beatrice, who is the author of COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial. He's also a coronavirus researcher, and he may have some answers for us. So first of all, let me invite into the conversation Michael. Good morning, Michael, and thanks for joining us. I know you're out in Texas, so your time zone behind us or two, and it's real early on a Sunday morning, and I certainly do appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. So first of all, COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial is your latest book. It's available on Amazon, that is. I know the link is on our Facebook page, folks, so if you check out the post about Michael joining us, it's a direct link over to Amazon. Is it available through your website or anywhere else, Michael?
Barnes & Noble also, yeah.
Barnes & Noble, okay, great. So the coronavirus vaccine rollout, you know, it's just funny because just in the conversation with the caller in the first hour, we got on this a little bit because we just had the president's first press conference 64 days into his administration, and there wasn't one question on COVID-19 in that press conference. Did you watch it?
No, I caught a recap of it. I wasn't around when that...
At 1:30 in the afternoon, because most of us are working. Yeah, I get it. I think that was part of the design, Michael.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that the vaccine rollout has really followed the trajectory of what the previous administration did, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think this is a good thing for our vulnerable population. I feels like we've probably gone a little bit far on it in terms of doing testing on kids when they're really at no risk whatsoever. I mean, no risk whatsoever.
Right, which opens up the whole issue of the school openings in the debate, right? I mean, that's just has been ridiculous that an entire year has been lost.
It's unfathomable. What's funny is I'm working on a second book, and so I started doing some research to take a little different angle. And so I was really kind of taking a look at the science, sort of what I call BC, before COVID, and science AC, after COVID. And so COVID-19 is a pandemic that the WHO and the CDC would have identified as a Class 2 pandemic. In that scenario, the mitigations they suggested in their playbooks would have been schools closed for up to 4 weeks. Crazy when you think about that where we are today. Schools closed for up to 4 weeks, and mask wearing if you were sick or symptomatic only, and then perhaps staggered shifts at some places of work where you would enable a little bit more social distancing, and during the waves, when a community was hit, canceling large events. Those are all actually very reasonable mitigations even today for COVID. What we've done is so much more extreme, kind of these one-size-fits-all lockdowns, keeping kids out, part of this research. So we've lost one person under 18 per million. We've lost 15 times more kids to transportation-related accidents during the COVID year than we have to COVID, and over 10 times more suicides.
There you go.
Kids than COVID.
This is the part, Michael, that I think is totally being ignored by the media because it doesn't fit the narrative they're pushing here. Is the damage being done by these lockdowns, the suicide rate, the suicide attempts, the depression, the backsliding of education. And we also, we have, the mainstream students, right? And I feel really bad for the seniors and that have lost their senior year, which is supposed to be the best year in your school, right? Until you go off to college. And you got prom and homecoming and whatever, all of those things that go with that. It is gone. But we have students who absolutely need that interaction with their teachers. We have the special ed students who are more hands-on learning. We've got children on the spectrum who do not function well with remote learning and screen learning. I mean, there's just so much damage, I think, has been done with the education system, and that doesn't seem to be a concern. And I don't think it's a concern to the teachers' unions, because I know that they try to say that, most teachers want to go back, but that's a crock, because if most teachers wanted to be back in school, then they would be back in school, because they tell the unions that's what you need to make happen, and that they want to go back to the classroom. So they're accepting it and they're living with it. And this is, I think, a huge problem that we have with it. So the question, I guess, to you is whether these lockdowns did any good in the first place.
My blood was boiling yesterday when Dr. Birx was interviewed, and she made a comment like the first 100,000 deaths were probably not preventable, but for everything after that, there's many, many things we could have done to mitigate that. And so, there's a lot of countries that performed worse in COVID-19 than us. And then as a call out, based on data that we saw from like Miami and North Dakota and Iowa, where they would separate COVID and doing death certificate matching, when you look at whatever our numbers are for hospitalizations and deaths, about 70% of those are probably real. Still a big number, right? I'm no COVID denier. I lost a relative in a care facility to COVID, and I've kept my 89-year-old parents in Detroit under wraps for the last year. So I've got a lot of respect for what COVID could do to a vulnerable population. But suggesting that, if we did more mitigation, more, here's the only way you can really do this. You'd have to really shut your country down to the point where you didn't even have essential workers except a very, very finite, small number. They're going around, drones delivering food and hazmat suits and the delivery people and things like that. And everybody really, really stays at home. And then the question is, does it just resurface when you lift those restrictions? Right. And I just don't know how many data points we need to know that we call these NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions. I just don't know how much data we need to show our leaders that these things there's some things that are a little bit effective, and most of it's not. Mask wearing just hasn't proven to be effective to do anything.
Well, the mask wearing, can we jump on that for a moment? Because, we go back and there's a certain number of this population that look at Dr. Fauci as some kind of, knowing all being here. And the thing is, I'm sorry, but his credibility as a scientist got lost when back in the beginning, he came out and told us not to wear masks, that not to do it, and then admitted that the reason he told us not to wear masks was because he didn't want us all running out and buying up the masks and therefore denying medical professionals those masks. So he already established, in my opinion, that he is willing to say whatever he thinks he needs to say to manipulate us, and he doesn't deliver just the science. So he lost that high ground. I'm sorry.
Fauci's not a public health expert. Fauci's sort of he's a zero COVID guy. And so everything he sees and says is through a lens of trying to get COVID, down to zero. And that's not really a realistic expectation. COVID's going to recede into our backdrop annually. We will have some degree of COVID deaths probably the rest of my life. But the pandemic as we knew it is over. So we won't have anything, that rush that we had. Every community, we say we got 3 waves. We mostly got one wave, and it hit just whenever it decided to hit communities, right? The upper Midwest really didn't get it in the last spring or in the summer. They got it hard. The Dakotas, for example, they got it hard in the wintertime in November and December. And so everybody kind of gets their turn. But there's many things that are part of public health that transcend just COVID. And when you hear talk of Fauci, he seems to have a bit of disregard for, or just doesn't really talk about all these other collateral consequences, right? You've got 50 million kids that have had a year and a half of fractured education. Almost half of the 6 most common cancers, they never got diagnosed last year. 650,000 cancer patients missed their treatment. And on and on. There's a lot of those things that,
absolutely.
When they shut down hospitals, then they said, only all non-essential things. These weren't facelifts that were getting canceled. Right?
No.
These were serious things. And to me, there's the two biggest screw-ups that we had looking back were, one, the schools. Not in the spring. Like, I kind of understand how in the moment that happened. Not reopening schools fully with the data that we had in the fall is unconscionable. And the other is shutting down hospitals when they were basically empty.
Yeah.
They were, outside of a 4 to 6 week period, no community would even know COVID existed. I'm not a COVID denier.
No, I get it. I'm with you on that. And yes, on top of the debacle of the school system and the education, yes, there are countless cases that, these stories that come across and doing the research about, a woman who broke her leg and was so afraid to go to the hospital, she just dealt with it, and they had to take the leg eventually because she didn't have it set, which could have been done very easily. And of course, these hospitals they know how to disinfect a room. They have the PPE equipment there was really no reason to stop these important procedures that needed to take place.
There is a fear part of this, so some of that's real. I'll say one thing that seems to be difficult, and there's no sarcasm. I really believe this is difficult. Is the number one source of spread of COVID is in healthcare settings, and so I think protecting, keeping that virus under wraps in a hospital and in a long-term care facility in a nursing home it has to be a lot harder than it looks, because all that continued throughout the entire pandemic. We were still losing, just as recently as 10 weeks ago, 10,000 long-term care facility patients a week. And so that's one of the puzzling things, right? So because the biology of this hasn't changed, the median age of deaths is still right at life expectancy in every country. And so when you're talking about closing down schools, when kids are at statistically zero risk, right? It's like, I'm not exaggerating, it's 1 in a million kids that have lost their lives to COVID. It's much, much, much higher. It's in the tens of thousands if you're very, very elderly. It might be like 14,000. I'd have to look at the numbers, but very significant number. And so the idea of doing these, again, one-size-fits-all type of lockdowns and closing schools when we've got Sweden has been open, their schools were open the whole time without masks and social distancing. And Sweden, you could take a look at Norway. We do comparisons there. Norway really didn't get hit with COVID. They had normal protocols in their schools. But let's say Norway didn't get hit. Sweden really did. They were in the game. Very comparable stats to Michigan. And they had their kids going back with normal protocols, and nothing happened. Nothing.
Right. And that's, every once in a while I think about this, Michael, and I would say, imagine if this was actually a very contagious and deadly virus, meaning that it was deadly upon contact, something from one of these novels. And
the movie Outbreak.
Yeah. Like the Outbreak. I mean, where you come in contact with it, that's it. You got 72 hours type of thing. And I mean, some of the protocols that were put into place was as if we were dealing with that. And like you pointed out, for children who can't pass this along apparently, and the survival rate is they survive. I mean, it would have to be incredibly extenuating circumstances, right? They would have to have some kind of condition that would allow COVID to take hold and do something. But on the most part, they're safe. They're fine.
I mean, look, at the end of it, your annual flu is more lethal to to people under 30 than COVID. That's just what the data says.
So why are we acting like this is the outbreak? Why are we acting like this is a much more deadlier disease? And I'm not downplaying at all the people who have been lost to COVID at all. I'm saying that it seems that we have overreacted in a lot of cases, and we're not following the science. Yet we were lectured about following the science. The previous administration was criticized for not following the science, which I pretty much think they did. And we have the travel bans that were put into place to show that it was being taken serious.
Even the travel bans weren't part of the playbooks for the WHO and the CDC going back before COVID. And so I would love to debate, a Birx and Fauci and Redfield, if they were the CDC director during the Trump administration. I would love to debate these people, and I'm not kidding. I'd almost.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because we're going to be joined now by Dr. Burke, who's going to join us. And no, I'm just kidding. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, I would. Because I would love to interview them on or debate them on these mitigations and what they think we really could have done. Because the good thing about this is I've written a couple pieces on this called The Burden of Proof.
Mm.
And so fortunately, we've got some countries that had very relaxed standards, protocols, and we've got some states as well, right? We've got some states that had very, I'd say, disciplined or tight restrictions. Yours was one of them. And but, you look at New York and Illinois and Michigan and California and actually a number of others. And then you've got loose restriction states. You've got both Dakotas, you've got Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida. Let's take those, and then you've got other states that are kind of in the middle. But if lockdowns work, shouldn't the Dakotas have done way worse than other states? Shouldn't Florida have done worse than Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana, which are kind of, I don't like doing too many comparisons of like Florida and New York because the geographies are different and things. But you can't compare your geographic neighbors, right? Why didn't California do way better than, say, Nevada and Arizona, right? They did do a little better on deaths per million than Arizona. But in general, the burden should be on these places that lock down to show much better suppression, right? I don't mean by 20%, which is where that's what these spreads are between these states. I mean 4 or 5 times, 10 times, right? It should be much, much better. It just isn't correlating data.
So why is the data so different among states? And we saw, when we look at, if we step back, right, and we look at the data and the mask wearing and all that, we see the drop-offs happening whether or not masks were mandated. Like, it didn't seem to make a big difference. So I guess the question is, why is the reality and the science so disconnected?
Right. One of the guys on Twitter, it's funny because as I've learned more about this, when I first wrote this book, I was not on Twitter.
Seriously?
Yeah, but I did get connected with Alex Berenson early on, actually back in March, a year ago.
Yeah.
I popped him an email. We exchanged a couple notes, and we have since then. And he was really the only person that was pumping out some interesting kind of reality data. And if you really kind of trace it back, all reality data has originated from maybe 20 people on Twitter. And so if you weren't on Twitter, if you're not, and you're just your average person, kind of following the headlines in the news, and maybe let's say on Facebook, you wouldn't, and Facebook's banned a lot of this kind of team reality information, you wouldn't have context. So Twitter, in a good way, has originated all the, reality data around what's happened with COVID. If we didn't have Twitter, I don't know where we'd be. We'd be locked down, Joe, but we'd kind of be looking around us being like, I heard that hospitals are empty. No one's died at my school. I guess this is a really big deal, but it seems like
it just hasn't affected my sphere of influence here, right? And knock on wood, I'm not going to get notes on this, right? Messages, Michael. I personally, nobody in my immediate family or immediate circle friend has died from COVID. People I know had it. We had people here in the station who works at the station who got COVID and they stayed home, and they had like a cold and a sniffle, and then they were fine. But now they have the antibodies and everything. But so I don't know anybody that passed from it. That doesn't mean that people didn't pass from it. It just means it didn't happen in my sphere of my world. Okay, so yeah, I go, okay, what's going on? Then we find out. If we look at New York and the situation that's going there, that's a whole different thing, right? Because you got the governor falsifying numbers and lying about things, but the panic button was pushed, and the president, Trump, that is, sent the Comfort and the Javits Center, right? And they basically went empty the entire time. They weren't used, yet he was putting COVID positive people back into nursing homes.
Right.
Was he afraid to use those things because it would make Trump look good? Is it that
Look, I think I'm just being honest here, right? I think that a lot of the intentions and decisions that were made in March were noble. I think so I don't think, and this is where I've actually defended in my book and in interviews since, I think that I have a bit of forgiveness for Cuomo's nursing home decision in the moment that it was made in March, because I don't know that it would have been intuitive to the governors, the 4 or 5 governors that put those policies into place. Here's who I really hold accountable, right? By the time we locked down around March 20th or so, we had cruise ship data from the 2 quarantine cruise ships, which to this date is the most telling thing that happened.
Yeah, they were petri dishes, basically, right? They were controlled environments.
controlled environments, kind of do-nothing scenarios. And so the initial model predicted that we would have 2.2 million deaths. That's what triggered our lockdowns, and a 9-fold shortfall in hospital beds on our worst day last summer. And so I took, before I decided to write a book, I took the model assumptions and plugged them into the demographics. And so we had 7,400 people on those 2 cruise ships. We should have lost 155 people based on the model's infection rates and age stratification. And we lost 10 to 155. And so I knew this was kind of off the rails. But, the thing is, the people that died were elderly. And we knew that nursing homes were ravaged in Italy before we locked down. They were the first Western country to really get it. And I think that it should have been intuitive to a, quote, healthcare expert like Adams, Dr. Redfield, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci. It should have been intuitive to them to say, you can't send COVID-positive patients into the wards of the most vulnerable group. That it would not have been intuitive, I don't believe, to a Governor Cuomo or Whitmer or Newsom. I do think it should have been intuitive, or it's malpractice, practically, for Fauci and those people not to have connected those dots. No one ever talks about that, but that's just my opinion.
No, I agree with that 100%. And that is the question that I've been having, and I know my listeners have been having, is there, at what point, do you start to question their wisdom and their practice as physicians, because it doesn't match up with the reality?
So I wrote this piece. You're on Twitter, so you can go to my piece and use it for a future show. But because I posted it, but it's called "The CDC Jumps the Shark," and so I took kind of a deep dive into some of the 3 or 4 major CDC assertions throughout this thing. And so, to support mask wearing, they did a study in Kansas last summer, and they released it in November. And in this tight little window, they were showing that the counties that required masks in Kansas did better than the others that didn't. Well, then there was a cutoff point, and right after that cutoff point, it was before the winter season had hit, Kansas blew up, nullifying all the data. They still released it. Then they did a study on the double masking, right? I made a joke about it because it's like, some middle school kids took a mannequin from one of the retailers that went out of business because of the lockdowns, and they decided to slap 2 masks on it and said, hey, that looks like it probably works better. And that's really what the CDC did, and they released that as a credible study. And then the wild.
Wait a minute. What part of that is the joke, though?
Oh, the mannequin part.
Oh, the mannequin part. Okay.
The taking it from a retailer.
Right. So that's the joke. Okay, fine. Because you scared me for a second that that's the CDC said, oh, okay, well, we'll call that a study. Yikes.
But they did call it a study, and I went into that, and I think, for future stuff, it would be great to review that. But the wildest one was, imagine this, right? So Governor Abbott, about 4 weeks ago or so, he makes an announcement and says, hey, we're going to eliminate all restrictions and a statewide mask mandate in a week. So then I'm thinking, imagine this panic, right? You've got Governor Newsom and Cuomo and, some of these others saying, oh, my God, did the CDC, do something or else we're going to lose this thing. And the White House is calling the CDC saying, do something. So 3 days later, Joe, the CDC releases a study that shows that when you wear masks and don't practice indoor dining, you have better results than if you are in a place that doesn't require masks and they can indoor dine. So I thought, well, that would be an interesting study. Let's look. What they showed was basically about 0.5% improvement in COVID results in the places that did not require indoor dining and masks. And over time it went up to 1.7%. That's a rounding error, right? I mean, I was expecting, if you're going to call that a study,
right,
and a data point worth closing businesses and wearing masks, it should be what? I don't even know. 20% would even be low.
Yeah.
It's more like 3 times, right? If you had 3 times more activity associated with indoor dining and not wearing masks, I'd probably write a book about why we should wear masks and not eat indoors.
Exactly. Hey, Michael, we got to take a break. Can you stick with us? Because I want to talk about the vaccines and all of the hoopla around that. All right, folks, we're speaking with Michael Beatrice, who is the author of COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial. It's available on the link on my Facebook page, and we'll continue in just a moment after this from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'm Joe Mangiacotti.
Hey folks, Joe Mangiacotti here, and you might have picked up on the fact that I've recently moved and was taking the time to purge the clutter and freshen up some of the furniture and decor. And there is no better item to freshen up than your bed. That's right, your bed is the most important piece of furniture you have. After all, you spend more than a third of your life on it. I checked out the huge, once family-owned stores with tens of thousands of square feet of showroom and warehouses and movie theaters and food courts and shows and the overhead that goes with them. But then I discovered a true family-owned shop. John Rosenfeld and his son have a small showroom and warehouse right in Metro West, 50 Main Street, Ashland. John and his family are actually there in person. They do keep hours, but will meet you by appointment. That's right. John will meet you when it's convenient for you. I first bought a mattress from the big store the brothers used to own and a power base that moved the head and feet, but then I met John and checked out his showroom at 50 Main Street in Ashland and online at boxdropmiddlesex.com and ended up with a better mattress and power base that also heats and massages, all for less than half of what I was going to spend at the other place. Box Drop is a discount mattress store, and John specializes in clearance and closeouts and buys directly from the manufacturer with low overhead and just family employees, passing the savings on to you, and you can see it reflected in the price every day. Click boxdropmiddlesex.com or call John on his cell. This is his cell number, 508-579-9309. That's 508-579-9309. And find John on Facebook at Boxdrop Middlesex. John loves referrals, and this is the best referral I've given so far this year. Dropboxmiddlesex.com. Good morning and welcome to Case Files from the LPDAM, where we take a look at the actual cases, the law, and lessons from the findings, and where we share the experiences of the experts of the Private Detectives Association of Massachusetts. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and joining us this week is Sean Burke, president of the LPDAM and resident manager of Courtside Legal Investigation. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Joe.
Well, welcome back to Case Files. Good to have you here.
It's great to be here, and it's finally nice to have some good weather.
We got a good break this week. That is true. Very good stuff coming our way that way. Well, today's media outlets, Sean, right, they often focus on the acts of the perpetrator. I mean, we've seen this in the news recently, and of the perpetrator themselves, but we rarely hear about the victim and the impact that they suffer. And I ask this because I've often heard you talk about the victims many times, and that victimization can be curbed by proactive measures.
Joe, I love the questions you ask. It really makes us all think beyond the surface of an issue. You're right, media outlets focus on what sells. The wrongdoer is often more marketable than the victim. It's unfortunate, but true. You may be surprised, but at LPDM, vast majority of our member clients are victims, not perpetrators. Our clients typically have been conned by another through some form of breach of contract, believe someone's representations that ultimately fall short of their claims, or suffered some physical or emotional distress by a perpetrator. When you've been wronged, you can locate the right private investigator at lpdm.org.
And Sean, being victimized can be so demoralizing that it must be hard for them to stand up for themselves.
Joe, being a victim can really be a blow to one's confidence. Most victims fall prey because they want to believe in another party. It is our trust in others that can be seen as a weakness by a perpetrator. LPDM members surveyed on victimization report their clients often want to expose the truth for closure purposes, as much as holding the perpetrator accountable for his or her actions. It is hard being a victim. With that said, Joe, the first step to standing up to a wrongdoer is retaining an LPDM member business. We are in the business of exposing a wrongdoer for who they really are. The results of our investigations are based on facts and so powerful they'll stand up in court.
It must be so hard to come to terms that you've been a victim to a particular situation.
Joe, there is a grieving process associated with being victimized that includes stages of embarrassment, disappointment, and anger. These stages often occur before the victim can start the rebuilding process. As part of a victim moving on, they often seek closure to events associated with their victimization and want to expose the truth. It is the truth that helps rebuild their reputation, their confidence in driving through life, and their ability to learn from the traumatic situation of being a victim. LPDM is here to help. We love helping people who have been wrong. We get the facts so you can be whole again. What we do. Remember, you're in good hands with LPDM.
Well, you certainly are. Sean, thanks for stopping by again. Always great information.
Thank you, Joe.
And thank you for joining us for Case Files from the LPDAM. Join us here each week on WCRN AM 830 and online anytime at lpdamcasefiles.com. Visit us at lpdam.org, and you can find LPDAM on Facebook and Twitter at PIN Mass, and anytime at 800-955-6274. For Sean Burke, I'm Joe Mangiacotti. This This is Find a Forever Home for Teddy's Friends, brought to you by the Cantiani Insurance Group with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance. This week's candidate comes to us from Buddy Dog in Sudbury. You should get to know Scooby. He is a handsome young goofball from South Carolina. He loves everyone he meets, humans and pups alike. He does like to play hard, so roommates of any species will need to be sturdy and confident enough to handle him. So a large fenced-in yard would be a pretty good thing for Scooby. He would not do well in a small home or apartment. He's a 2-year-old neutered male, unknown breed mix, about 70 pounds but a healthy weight. He was found as a stray in South Carolina. He is food motivated and he does know sit, so training will be pretty easy and some basic obedience training is recommended. Again, Scooby comes to us from Buddy Dog in Sudbury. For more on Scooby, check out Teddy Goodpup's Facebook page for links and pictures and, of course, information how to visit and maybe even adopt Scooby and bring him home to his new forever home. Find a Forever Home is brought to you by Cantiani Insurance Group with locations at 318 Plantation Street and East Douglas Insurance and anytime at 508-791-2088.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN, our affiliates, and, of course, live streaming on the TuneIn app at WCRN. Tell Alexa to play WCRN, and she'll do it. No questions asked. We're also live streaming on our Facebook page at Joe Mangi Show, MANGI, and that is our handle for all our social media, right? Twitter, Instagram, even Rumble and YouTube and Parler. It's all there. 508-871-7000 from the Box Drop Middlesex Mattress Outlet Studios. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and our guest is Michael Beatrice, who is the author of COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial. The link to the book on Amazon is on my Facebook page, as well as at Barnes & Noble. And Michael is online with us and from Texas, right? And Texas has been in the news when it comes to COVID because you guys dropped that mask mandate and been accused. Your governor's been accused of playing politics with this. And one of the big issues out there now, of course, we've got, Michael, the opening of the schools, which I think it's just absolutely ridiculous that what has happened to the students. And then we've got the debates that are happening with the vaccine. So, of course, it didn't help that you had people like Kamala Harris under the Trump administration saying they wouldn't trust or take a vaccine that was available under that administration. I mean, almost making it sound like, President Trump was in the basement of the White House with beakers and test tubes, mixing it up himself, and she was going to trust that. And that was, I think, very damaging to the taking vaccines and the vaccination rollout. And what do we say on this? What's okay, what's not okay to do after you take the vaccine, and how soon? And we've got the multiple ones, right? We've got the Moderna and the Pfizer, and then Johnson & Johnson came out with more of a traditional vaccine, correct? Because the first two are dealing with that mRNA versus the dead virus traditional vaccine. Am I understanding that right?
So I'm not, first off, I don't want to step too far out of my wheelhouse, and I think a decision on the vaccines that somebody makes should be a decision between them and their doctor. So
I agree.
I've been supportive of the vaccines, supportive of anything that gets us out of this. But if you're in a vulnerable group, minus some condition that your doctor says, that it would work out, like, I'm a fan of it. I've been very supportive. My elderly parents have gotten the vaccine, and my brother's a surgeon, and he got it. I'm waiting for the J&J vaccine.
Me too.
For me, that feels like, the better one. But one interesting study, I guess I have 2 points on this. One thing that's sort of crazy is we monitor and put so much stock in the vaccines, and for some reason we haven't given much credence to the 150 to 200 million people that have been infected already, which they should have, traditionally pre-COVID, science before COVID, they would have probably better immunity or comparable immunity to somebody that was vaccinated. And we want all these people to get vaccinated. I've got friends that have, had COVID. Almost everybody I know in my circle, social circle, and my sons, including him, my son, have all had COVID over the last, this winter wave, and so they're all asking me like, should I get vaccinated? And I'm like, well, you don't need to get vaccinated.
You kind of did. You had a natural vaccination. Your body has created those, antibodies already.
So there was a good study that came out, or an interesting study that came out 2 or 3 days ago, and it showed that in people that have had a COVID infection, if they get the RNA vaccine, they actually have less resistance after the second shot, like kind of noticeably. It's almost like it's overkill, and it's an overload, and I don't recall all the details of it right now. But the takeaway was, if you've been infected, you might consider, and they were using soft language, but their results were conclusive. Don't take the second shot if you've been infected. Just take the first, or maybe wait, or take the J&J. And so I talked to a couple doctors about it. Both doctors that I happened to, again, just a small sample, happened to have had COVID, and they both said they were waiting to take the J&J somewhere down the road, but they didn't feel under any immediate pressure. But look, the vaccines are a good thing for us, whether they're foolproof or whether they're helpful to our vulnerable populations. They should lessen the blow, even if they're not perfect. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for them, and it's a good thing to get us out of this.
Wow. Well, I agree with you in that, again, as I said earlier, people I know and in my family and circle had COVID, but it passed through. It was like having flu symptoms, cold. No one I know passed from it, and knock on wood. I mean, that's very fortunate for that. So the question, I guess, is, the COVID-19 versus the reality of the disease, and where are we now, and should schools be opening basically across the board? Should travel be pretty much lifted? I mean, that's the thing about this, Michael. During this whole time, it was like they ignored the survival rate, right? The news never talked about, here's COVID, but look at all the people who are surviving. How many people are infected and had it, and are we not either in at least in certain demographics reached herd immunity, or at least approaching it very quickly?
Probably. One of the challenges that I feel like failures we've had is that for all the things the government's done and spent money, they should have, back in 3 different periods. You could say like February would be one, August would have been one, and then May would have been one. But they should have done pure randomized samplings for antibodies to see exactly what we're looking at. So because none of that's been done in America, we don't know. But like the WHO estimated last fall that 17 times more people had it than were the official case number. The CDC had estimated maybe 7 times more. So 17 times with our current rate would be a very high number here in America. But it's no leap to think that we've had over 150 million to possibly even 200 million people that have been infected. That's a working number.
Well, I think there was some discussion out there too about the number of people prior to this, because it really picked up, that we had this and it was happening in March last year, maybe February type of thing. But there were probably a good number of people that had it and recovered from it end of 2019 and very beginning of 2020. But we didn't know it yet. We didn't understand. We didn't even realize this was happening at that time.
Yeah, could have been. I don't have I mean, I know it became an official thing at the very end of 2019 in Wuhan, and a lot of the data is a little spotty. But just to go back to a couple of your questions, should we be able to travel, right? I mean, it just makes your blood boil when you see some of the Walensky's news about, we shouldn't travel. Okay, here's how we should travel. We've had 30 million flights worldwide since COVID started a little over a year ago. 1 billion people have been on airplanes. The common sense question I'll just ask you is, how many stories or headlines have you read about an outbreak associated with an airport or an airplane?
Yeah.
0.
Exactly. 0. You got it. Hey, folks. I'm sorry, go ahead.
should schools be open? How many outbreaks have you heard about where people got sick and died associated with a school being open?
Yeah.
The answer is zero.
Yeah, the whole school situation really bothers me. I can't tell you how much. I mean, I don't have, school-age children anymore. I don't, I have nieces and great nieces and nephews, yeah, but I mean, no direct thing to it. I'm not in the school, but it bothers me to no extent that this is ridiculous, and we're told that majority of schools will be open. Later to learn in a White House briefing that might mean 1 day a week is considered back into play here. All right, folks, our guest is Michael Beatrice. He is the author of COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial. He's a coronavirus researcher. 508-871-7000. Take some phone calls, Michael.
Sure.
All right, let's go to Mark in Worcester, who's been waiting patiently. Good morning, Mark. You're on with Michael Beatrice, and you look marvelous.
You look marvelous as well.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Michael.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, how are you? Have you heard the comments? Have you heard the comments that were recently made by the former director of the CDC? I believe his name is Robert Redfield.
Yeah.
Have you heard the comments he made regarding COVID-19, the pathogen itself?
Yes, that it originated in the virology lab in Wuhan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read it.
In direct contradiction to the reports being put out by the World Health Organization. Direct contradiction to the WHO. I find that very curious, don't you?
So the people
former director of the CDC.
So, no, I wasn't surprised that he said it. I can tell you that most of us that follow this, the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, this virus has a 97% genome match with a coronavirus in a horseshoe bat that is not native to Wuhan. It lives a couple hundred miles away. Is the nearest place that they live.
The last thing I want to bring up, sir, is that we're experiencing an uptick, a significant uptick in positive cases within the state of Massachusetts. In Europe, Italy is into lockdown because of a significant spike in cases. So is the country of Germany. This is after mass vaccination programs like we have in the United States.
Right.
I don't get it. This what's going on with this particular pathogen. It doesn't seem to give a damn whether people are vaccinated or not. It looks to me like we're going into a third wave. What say you, sir?
Okay. First off, on the comments by Dr. Redfield, that is not a surprise to me. I actually wrote last April that that's likely where it came from. Not deliberately, and if it did, that's not where I've gone. But almost everybody that follows this thinks it came from the lab. It came from somebody who worked in the lab, and then it had a transmission with somebody in the wet market, and then that's how it got its momentum. So what Redfield said, pretty much everybody that follows this has already believed for months. So, or really almost a year. The second one is, I'd caution anybody about following cases. What cases really don't matter. It's hospitalization. So we need to really look at our hospitalizations rising or just cases. So in a lot of countries, we've seen a wake after vaccinations of positive cases. The data is just not clear why, but it's happened a lot of places. It happened big time in Israel, is the most prominent place that it's happened. And so what I don't know in Europe is our hospitalizations rising. So
they are.
They are rising there. So
yeah.
So I don't know what the answer. It seems like the vaccines. There's two data points I could share. One is it does seem like the vaccines have efficacy against variants, and it also seems like the vaccines trigger a spike up in cases, and I don't know why, and I don't know I'm not sure. I haven't read anything about anybody knowing why. Again, this is all very new to us. So I think
I'll live with this, Doctor. In the German press is reporting, DW News, Deutschwelle, the German equivalent of the BBC, that the new infections, which are causing a rise in hospitalizations, are a direct result of, they say, the UK variant, which is far more contagious than the old COVID-19. That's what they're saying on their news. I don't know. I'm just telling you what they're reporting.
Yeah.
Have a good one, sir.
Thank you, Mark. So there's a lot of dialogue around the UK variant, right? You hear people like Michael Osterholm as one of the people, and Andy Slavitt, they've been on TV for the last couple of weeks talking a lot about the UK variant. The thing is, when you look at the UK, it might be a bad variant. It might, but it isn't bad in the UK.
Right.
You could overlay the UK's curve, their winter curve, and it looks exactly like America's.
Yeah.
In terms of hospitalizations and deaths, and so the trajectories are exactly the same. So, if the UK variant's that bad, it doesn't seem like the timing of it has been real impacting in the UK.
Right. And if the variant is more contagious, that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't seem to be more dangerous, and it's just more contagious, but it's still the same virus, right? So you're saying that the ability to contract it goes up, but
not more people are getting sick.
Right. Yeah. So I'm not quite following that. All right. Our guest again is Michael Beatrice, who is the author of COVID-19 Lockdowns on Trial. Let's go to Joe in Worcester, who's been waiting patiently. Good morning, Joe. You're on with Michael Beatrice and myself.
Good morning to both of you. I've had the vaccination. I'm autoimmune compromised, having survived cancer. I'm diabetic. I'm in my early 60s. My brother, who's in a nursing home, has had both vaccinations. I've had the Pfizer. I've had no serious adverse side effects other than a sore arm. I hope you're not trying to be an anti-vaxxer spokesperson because...
No, I think he made that clear that he's not.
Yes, and I'm glad that he did make that statement because I know that even in my district where I work as a teacher, there have been instances where students have been put on full remote that we work in a hybrid format without stating the school district. I work as a teacher, and when people are isolated at home and remote, there's no mention of the reason. So it's mere speculation because of HIPAA laws as to outbreaks in certain communities in terms of school communities. So there have been instances of infection for students, but no mention of the because of HIPAA laws. There's no mention of the particular circumstances as to why certain people are put on full remote for a period of time. So I mean, there have been instances, but I just hope that I realize that in some instances people have been exposed to these viruses, but in the nursing home where my brother resides, thankfully through measures of isolation, he was never exposed to anyone that had the infection, for which he's been vaccinated, and thankfully he's living a good life in the nursing home, and he's in a facility where they practice safe measures to isolate people that are infected with the virus.
Good.
That's
great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, great to hear. And no, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm actually very supportive of them. I'm less supportive of things like, Rutgers University announcing that they're requiring all students must have had the RNA vaccination, which at this point is largely the RNAs, in order to go back to school. I'm not in favor of those types of requirements, but if you are at risk, I'd be the first in line. I would. I had my parents be the first in line in Michigan because they're 89 years old. They're very healthy, but they're still 89. So no, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. I'm all for it. I'm not for the requirements, this vaccine.
Oh, no, it should be voluntary, certainly. It should definitely be voluntary. I concur with that. It should not be mandatory like mumps, measles, rubella, and back in the day when I had those vaccinations in my childhood, my distant youth. I don't know if it was mandatory, but I recall having those vaccinations. I mean, we've survived vaccinations down for the centuries. If you go back in time, you have Louis Pasteur doing vaccinations back in the 1880s. You have there's a vaccination history dating back to the 19th century, for God's sake.
Yeah. All right, Joe, thank you for the call. Great call. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great call.
So, Michael, let's talk about that, the hesitancy by some to get the shot. And what does the science tell us about that regard? Because I think instinctively most of us, including myself, don't ever like the idea of mandatory anything. And especially mandatory, you've got to put something into your body because government told you to. That just goes against my grain, I guess. But what about the hesitancy for some to get the shot?
Well, if I was in an at-risk category, again, this is a decision that someone should have with their doctor.
Absolutely.
But minus something like that. If I was in an at-risk category, I'd be the first in line to get one of the vaccines. And I was talking to some people that I trust that are very, very knowledgeable about all things COVID and the vaxes. And this woman that I talked to, so she's a doctor, but she said, listen, I lost my mom who was 83 and very healthy without an underlying condition of COVID. And so I was asking her what she thinks about my mom, and she said, look, your mom might have some side effects, but her chances of dying of COVID are a lot higher than of dying from the vaccine. If I were you, I would have her get it. And that's what I thought, and that's what we did.
Right.
So I'm supportive of that. The idea that young people need to get the vaccine when they're at 1 in a million risk, I don't know. That's I feel like we're going a little bit too far on that.
Yeah. Well, before we have to close, just your take on the spring break. Down in Florida. I mean, it got out of hand. I think that was just a pressure valve situation that people went nuts down there because we've been locked up for a year, and they got down there. But are we seeing any uptick because of spring break? And are we in danger as they return home from spring breakers?
I mean, my opinion is no, but when you look at activity, let's just take Florida. Let's forget that they're traveling, but Florida and Texas are still in a decline, in a better situation than New Jersey and New York for some reason. So, the two of the most open states are still in a decline, and two of the still restricted states are still they haven't gotten through this. At the end of it, how long do you need to do this stuff? These restrictions to know, hey, you know what? If you are in an at-risk category, you should probably keep a low profile, and everybody else needs to live. We'd end up in the same place, I guess is all I'm saying. Yeah. And we just have not learned that lesson. It'll be interesting to see how history remembers this.
Now, President Biden said that if we behave ourselves and do what we're told, we might be able to have a small gathering on the 4th of July. I think we've kind of been doing that already, Joe, but that aside.
Well, not just a little bit, but I mean, you've got, when they talk about these, I was talking to some people on rationalground.com. I'm one of their contributors, and there's some just brilliant minds around COVID data. We were discussing, I asked them this about a month ago, can you guys think of any legitimate super spreader event that we had in America? Like a real one, not the ones like they'll talk about Sturgis or Alabama celebrating their national champions.
Or the Trump rallies. Yeah.
The Trump, all these things, none of them panned out. The one super spreader event that we think was probably real was Mardi Gras a year ago in New Orleans.
Because we didn't know anything about it really then, right?
The timing of it, and it was really a northeastern hit, and then New Orleans got it sort of as an isolated pocket in the south, and the timing was very tight to Mardi Gras. We think that was probably a real one. The only real one that we've had.
Got it. Hey, Michael, thank you. We're out of time. And so we got to let you go because the show's over and we're hitting 8 o'clock here. But thank you for getting up early on a Sunday morning and joining us. Really appreciate it. It was really good information, and I think people got something out of it. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Great visit. You're a great host. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. All right, folks. That's going to wrap up this edition, the Sunday edition, and for the weekend for the Joe Mangiacotti Show. And, of course, don't forget to check out Political Thursdays, 10 o'clock now on Thursdays with Jerry Doherty. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, folks.
WACE Chicopee and WCRN Worcester. 8 o'clock.
We've all needed to hire professionals, but just didn't know who to trust. Word of mouth, website reviews. How do you know who to hire? Welcome to WCRN's Best in Business list. Simply visit WCRNradio.com and hit the big red button. There you'll find caring, trusted, and certified professionals ready to help you, complete with phone number and a link to their website. Finding the right certified